Okay, so I'm going to do a past paper walkthrough of the summer 2014 GCSE IGCSE Biology 06110 paper 11, so the multiple choice question. To do a multiple choice paper. I'm going to go through each question and hopefully we're going to do it in about half an hour just to get through everything and explain how you would answer each question, how I'd think about it. So I'm going to crack on with the first question. So our first question is, why does the energy needed by a human increase during the first 10 years of life? Our options are you can see the A, B, C, or D. So the correct answer, you can see from the mark scheme, is C. So why is it not A, B, or D? So A, coordination responses improve. So this is correct, that coordination responses do improve during the first 10 years of life, but this doesn't increase the energy cost of the animal or of the human. B, energy is needed for gamete formation. Energy is needed for gamete formation, but only a very small amount of energy. If you remember that gamete formation in females happens before birth and then develops during puberty, so after the first 10 years. And in males, it happens after puberty. So they finish forming after puberty. So that's, again, after the first 10 years. The body is growing. So if you think about from a baby to a 10-year-old, you grow quite a lot. The body gets bigger. You need more energy to move around, to move your lungs, to beat your heart, to move the blood around the body. So yeah, the bigger body needs more energy. And the diet is more balanced. That's kind of just irrelevant. So the diet may be more balanced. It might be less balanced by the time you're 10, but that doesn't really affect how much energy you need. Okay, so it's C. Question 2, which feature is characteristic of both annelids and arthropods? So this is something you kind of just have to learn. So it is segmented bodies, is of part of both. You just have to learn these features for annelids and arthropods. Okay, so question 3, which features do animal cells share with plant cells? So if you remember that, and you have chloroplast, cytoplasm, and nucleus. So a chloroplast is the light capturing and energy generating fixing carbon organelle in plant cells. Cytoplasm is the kind of aqueous fluid matrix where all of the organelles sit. And then the nucleus is the place in the cell which contains DNA and all the information for the cell to make proteins. So a nucleus and a cytoplasm are present in both animals and plants, and a chloroplast is present in only plants. So if you want one that is present in both, so animals share with plant cells, so present in both animal cells and plant cells, it's not going to be a chloroplast, that's only in plants, but it is going to be a cytoplasm and nucleus. So if we look down here, C has no chloroplast, and then a cytoplasm and a nucleus, so it's going to be C. Question 4, the diagram shows an animal, and then we have to use the key to identify an animal. So we're going to start at the top and say, are their wings present or are their wings absent? So if we look at the picture, there are wings, so the wings are present. So we go to 2, 1 pair of wings visible or 2 pairs of wings visible. We can see there's only 1 pair, 2 wings, so 1 pair of wings. So we have A is our answer. So it's animal A. Question 5, which pair of statements about a plant cell is correct? Outer surface of the cell and position of the sap vacuole. So where is the outer surface? What's on the outer surface of the cell? We have a cell membrane, and then outside of that, on a plant cell, we have a cell wall protecting the cell, keeping the cell, stopping the cell from expanding or and bursting. And then the position of the sap vacuole. If you remember, if you think about a diagram of a plant cell, we have our cell wall in our kind of cuboidal cell, and then in the middle of this, we have our vacuole, which is surrounded all the way by cytoplasm. So we're going to have a cell wall surrounded by, and our vacuole is surrounded by cytoplasm, so it's D. The diagram shows a cell. Which structure is not present? Cell membrane, cell wall, cytoplasm, or nucleus. So if you have a look at here, this is our diagram. All around the edge, we have our cell membrane. In the middle, this black dot represents our nucleus. Our cytoplasm is the thing which everything sits in. So if there was no cytoplasm, then none of the rest of these organelles would be present. And these could represent any number of things. They could be vacuoles, they could be some other sort of organelle. But if you have a look, there doesn't seem to be any cell wall present. There's nothing around the outside of our cell membrane protecting it and keeping the cell rigid. So the answer is B. The diagram shows a section through a root. What are the levels of organization? What are the levels of organization of the labeled structures? This is our cross section through the root. Here's the middle of the root. Here are all our hairs around the edge. So our the outside, these hairs are kind of organized on a cellular level. You can see each of these are made from individual hairs, so that we've labeled a cell. So P is cellular. So it's going to be A or B. And then if you look at R is kind of labeling the whole root. So that's an organ level, that's the whole organ. So it's going to be B, we go for P, and then on the organ level, we have R. So it's got to be these, that's the only one where it can be right. And then Q, we're labeling this tissue, this tissue surrounding the matrix in the root. So it's B. Which structures contain a cell nucleus? So we have to remember what kind of cells make up all of these structures. So a red blood cell, remember, it's very specialized. It's really full of hemoglobin. So a red blood cell, and they've removed the nucleus. Red blood cells only live for a few months, and then they get turned over. So our red blood cell doesn't contain a nucleus. So we've got to be C or D. So it doesn't contain a nucleus. It's either going to be C or D. We can rule out these two already. And our root hair cell is basically a normal plant cell with a specialized root hair ending. So that does contain a nucleus. So we've got to have a tick here. So it's actually, we can already conclude from the first two, it's got to be C. And then a xylem vessel. Remember, a xylem vessel is made from dead lignified cells. So it's where the water passes through. So our dead lignified xylem vessel has no nucleus, although the supporting cells around the xylem vessel do have nuclei. The diagram shows a shell. What type of cell does the diagram show? So we look at this diagram, we've got a thick cell wall around the outside. So that means we've got a plant cell, and then all this cytoplasm is kind of hanging off the cell wall. So that shows you that water has left the cell, which means that it must be, the water is visibly going out of the cell to make all this cell kind of shrivel up, which means that the outside must be a higher concentration than the inside. So the water will move down the gradient by osmosis. So the diagram is not an animal cell. We can rule out it's not an animal cell. So we can rule out A. It's still not an animal cell. We can rule out B. It's a plant cell. So it's one of these two. If it's a plant cell in pure water, then we'd have water moving into the cell. So it can't be this one. So it's got to be C. Two identical cylinders, 40 millimeters long, are cut from a potato. One, W, is placed in water, and the other, X, is placed in concentrated sugar solution. What are the lengths of the cylinders after 2 hours? So again, this is similar to the last question. If you have a cylinder, if you have a plant cell and you place it in water, then which is a lower concentration than the cytoplasm of the plant cells, the water is going to move into the cells, which means that the potato is going to expand, it's going to get longer. And X is placed in concentrated sugar solution. So remember, by osmosis, if you put something in a concentrated solution, then water will move out of it to try and equalize the gradient between the two sides. So the X is going to get shorter. So X is going to get shorter. So it goes from 40 millimeters to a length shorter than 40 millimeters, so 38 millimeters. So it's got to be D. And that also matches up with the W getting longer, so it gets bigger to 42. So D is the correct answer. What is a characteristic of all catalysts? They are broken down in reaction. They are made of protein. They are not changed by the reaction. They do not change the rate of reaction. So a catalyst is, by definition, is an item which speeds up the rate of reaction, but is not used up in the reaction. So if it was broken down during the reaction, it would be used up by the reaction. So it can't be A. They are made of protein. So the catalysts in the cell are enzymes. But this just asks us about catalysts. The catalysts are used in the chemical industry all the time. Like for example, in a catalytic converter in a car, that does not use proteins, but it does have a catalyst in. So they're not all made of proteins, so we can rule out B. They are not changed by the reaction. So during the reaction, they might change, but once you finish the reaction, once the reaction has proceeded to its endpoint, you can still have the catalyst left. So they are not changed by the reaction. So this is correct. They do not change the rate of reaction. So the definition of a catalyst is it increases the rate of reaction. So this can't be correct. So it's got to be C. 12. The bar chart shows the average number of chloroplasts in each of 3 different types of leaf cell. what are the three types of cell? So for this, you've got to remember that where the different types of cell sit in the leaf. So if you remember that the palisade cells are at the top of the cell, and then we have our spongy mesophyll layer, and at the bottom we have our guard cells and are surrounded by the pavement cells at the bottom of the leaf. So at the top of this, and the light comes from the top. So the top of the cell we've got lots of light, and in the middle of the cell we've got a moderate amount of light, and at the bottom of the cell we've got much less light because it's all been absorbed by the top. So in our guard cells, we're not going to have very much light because they're right at the bottom of the leaf, so they're going to have the least number of chloroplasts. So this is A. So there's got to be A then so far. So we can conclude just from looking at the guard cells, there's got to be A. So let's look at the rest of the question. If you couldn't remember that, what else would you think? So our cells with the most chloroplasts are the ones that the light hits first, so these palisade cells. So then that makes sense here. So the ones with the most chloroplasts have got to be our palisade cells. Does that make sense with A still? And spongy mesophyll cells kind of have an intermediate level of chloroplasts. They still have some light hitting them, so there's still worth putting chloroplasts in them, but they have fewer chloroplasts than, or lower concentration of chloroplasts, number of chloroplasts per unit volume of cytoplasm than in here, and more than our guard cells, our spongy mesophyll cells. Question 13. The diagram shows two food tests carried out on solution X. So we're adding biuret solution, and it turns purple, and we're using Benedict's solution and heat, and it turns red. So our two tests. So what nutrients are present in solution X? So our biuret solution, that gives us a measurement for proteins, sorry. So this is our test for proteins. And if we add in biuret, it turns purple, we get protein. And our Benedict's solution, remember our Benedict's test for reducing sugars, if we add Benedict's and we heat it, then we get red. And if it's the sugar, then we get red. So this tells us that it must be protein from our biuret test and sugar from our Benedict's test. A person has their gallbladder removed. Which statement is correct? They cannot eat carbohydrates. They can only eat fat in small amounts. They can eat only liquid fluid food. They must not eat more than one large meal a day. So, remember what the gallbladder does? The gallbladder produces bile, and bile digests fats. So if bile digests fats, that means that you're less capable of digesting fat if you don't have a gallbladder. So it's got nothing to do with carbohydrates, so we can rule out A. They only eat fat in small amounts. So you can still digest fat without a gallbladder, but you're not producing bile, so you're less good at producing at digesting fat. So you can only eat fat in small amounts. They can only eat liquid food. Again, they can eat solid food. They just can't eat lots and lots of fat. If they were eating bread without butter, that's got no fat. They can eat carbohydrates, which is solid, not affected by the fact they don't have a gallbladder to store bile, so they can eat solid food. They must not eat more than one large meal a day. And again, that's just not right. As long as it's relatively low in fat, they can eat more than one large meal. Which blood vessel contains valves? So valves only allow blood to flow in one direction. They don't allow it to flow backwards. So they open in this direction, blood can flow through, but if the blood tries to flow in the other direction, they close and the blood can't go that direction. In the arteries, and the arterioles, there's a high pressure gradient pushing the blood in one direction. So it can only so the blood really can only go in one direction because of the heart forcing in that direction. And arterioles are the same. They're just small arteries, so at high pressure with a high pressure gradient. Capillaries, they're basically too small to put a valve in. They're only one blood. So if you think about capillary, it's only really one blood cell wide. So this is our red blood cell. It only just fits through the capillary. There's not really room for extra valves. And there's also a pressure gradient throughout the capillaries pushing the blood in one direction. So it's not the capillary. The renal artery provides the liver with oxygenated blood from the heart against an artery, so it's under high pressure with a high pressure gradient, so it doesn't need valves. The renal vein returns the mixed blood from the liver, which has come from the hepatic portal vein and the renal artery, back to the heart. It's at low pressure, and so the blood could, in theory, flow in the wrong direction at points. And so it has valves so that your muscle movements, when they squash your veins, only move the blood in one direction. So the correct answer is D. When blood is flowing through the vena cava, which main blood vessel will it flow through next? So if you remember, the vena cava returns blood back to the heart. It's your big vein. So it's returning blood from the body tissues back into the right side of the heart. From the right side of the heart, all of our blood goes to our lungs. So our hepatic portal vein, if you remember, we go through the answers, why it can't be. So the correct answer is C. We're going to go through the answers and see which ones it can't be. So the hepatic portal vein, that takes blood from the digestive system over to the intestines, over to the liver. So that's, and then from there, from the liver, it goes through the renal vein back to the heart. So it's not that. Hepatic vein, again, that takes the blood from the liver back to the heart. The pulmonary artery. So if we think about our heart with 4 chambers, blood's coming in here from our vena cava, goes into our 4 chambers, into our right atria, into our right ventricle. So it flows into here, and then it goes out this way, and this is going to the lungs through the pulmonary artery. So this is actually the correct answer. C is our correct answer. And our pulmonary vein, if you remember, that comes back from the lungs. It's the only vein that contains oxygenated blood. It comes back from the blood into the left atria, and then into the left ventricle, which is then pumped out through the aorta to the rest of the body. So it's not the pulmonary vein. How does insulin move the pancreas where it's produced? The cell where it acts? Along nerves, in the blood, through the digestive system, or through the pancreatic duct. So it is in the blood. So it's not very many things move along nerves as a signaling agent. So you have action potentials moving along nerves. So they're an electrical current, electrical current moving along the nerve, but then they're not a signaling molecule. In the blood, so in the blood you already have a pumping blood around the body. It's moving quickly, so it's a really good place to move hormones. Really easy way to move hormones to all the tissues in the body. So, and that insulin acts on a huge number of tissues. So moving it to all the body is a really good thing to do. So it does get moved in the blood. Through the digestive system, if you tried to move something into the digestive system, then through the digestive system, it would just go out into your poo. So it's not through there. Through the pancreatic duct, again, the pancreatic duct is not the insulin side of the pancreas, it's the other side of the pancreas producing enzymes for digestive enzymes, which go into the digestive system. So yeah, that wouldn't be very useful for affecting the whole body. So it is B, in the blood. The graph shows the energy released by 2 animals through respiration as the external temperature changes. Rate of energy release in arbitrary units against the external temperature. So external temperature is increasing along here. Which conclusion can be drawn from the graph? Animal 1 and 2 release the least energy at 23 degrees C. Animal 2 always respires faster than animal 1. As the temperature rises, respiration always increases, and the rate of respiration is the same for both animals, 23 degrees C. So animal 1 and 2 release the least energy at 23 degrees C. So 23 degrees C is here, where the graphs cross over. We think 1, 2, 3, go up to here. And if we look at here, this animal 2 releases the least energy. It's at the lowest point down here at 10 degrees C. This releases the least energy down at kind of 2 degrees C. So that's not right. Animal 2 always respires faster than animal 1. And so if we look at animal 1 here, animal 1 is respiring really quickly. It's producing lots of energy, whereas animal 2 is producing much less energy. So no, that's not right either. As the temperature rises, respiration always increases. So if we look here, as the temperature rises past this maximum point for animal 1, the energy production decreases. So that's not right either. The rate of respiration is the same for both animals at 23 degrees C. So if we look at 23 degrees C again, here, the rate of respiration is the same as 7 arbitrary units. Here is the same for both animals as they cross over at 23 degrees C. So the correct answer is D. The graph shows changes in the volume of air in the lungs of a person at rest over a period of 30 seconds. So we see as the person breathes in, the volume of the air in the lungs increases, and as the person breathes out, the volume in the air, the lungs decreases. It's nice and rhythmic, going up and down. Which graph shows the changes in volume of air in the lungs of the same person immediately after they've done 5 minutes of vigorous exercise? So after vigorous exercise, remember that both the frequency and the depth of breathing increases, so the volume of each breath. So you can get more, so the increased blood flow past the lungs, through the lungs, can all be oxygenated. So if we look at this, in this graph, the frequency is increased, but the depth of breathing, so the volume in each breath, is not increased. That's not right. If we look at B, the depth of breathing is increased, but the frequency is actually decreased, so you wouldn't be really getting very much air, very much more oxygen to the blood. If we look at C, both the depth of the breathing and the frequency have both increased because we have more peaks during this period. There are more peaks here than there were in the original graph. And then in D, the volume of air in the lungs, in D, the depth of breathing has increased, but the frequency has not increased. So that's not what would happen during exercise. So the correct answer is C. 4 word equations are shown. Which are the equations for anaerobic respiration in humans and anaerobic respirations in yeast? So anaerobic means no oxygen, so we can rule out this one, no oxygen. If we look at P, carbon dioxide plus water goes to glucose production. That's creating glucose. That's not respiration. That's not breaking down glucose. That's not breaking down glucose. So this is actually photosynthesis. So it's not P. It can't be P because that's photosynthesis. So R, glucose to lactic acid. Remember that humans make lactic acid, when they respire without oxygen. So they make the lactic acid to regenerate our NAD. This is our equation for humans, for animals, without any oxygen respiring. And then glucose to alcohol plus carbon dioxide, that's what yeast do. So that's how you make beer or wine, is you use yeast without enough oxygen to make alcohol. And as a byproduct, they give off carbon dioxide. So anaerobic respiration in humans is R. So one of these two. And anaerobic respiration in yeast is S, so this one. So the correct answer is D. Which organs remove excretory products from the blood? So this question is a little bit of a trick question, in that you might think that the bladder, that's where your urine is stored, and then you remove waste products which are stored in your urine through the urethra and from your bladder. But that's not correct, because it's not the organ that removes it from the blood, it just removes it from your body. It's what stores it before it gets removed from the body. So we can rule out the ones with the bladder in, and then we're left with just this one. So our lungs, they're a very important point. They have lots of, all of the blood flow goes to the lungs. That's a really important place for removing toxins and poisons and breaking down things where you really don't want left in your lung, and then you can remove them by breathing them out if they're gases. And the kidneys, that's where you filter all of your blood. So it's where you generate urine, and all of your blood gets filtered through your kidneys fairly regularly on a kind of a continuous basis. So D is the correct answer. The diagram shows a simple reflex arc. What is the correct order of events after the knee is tapped? So for a reflex arc, you'll remember that when you have a stimulus, which stimulates a sensor. The sensor then gives signals up our sensory neuron, and then the sensory neuron goes through a relay synapse in the spinal cord, and then our motor neuron is activated, which activates our muscle to elicit the appropriate response. So in the knee-jerk reflex, our knee is tapped, and then that stimulates our receptor. So number 4 is first. So we can say it's either going to be C or D. We can rule out A and B because they don't have number 4 first. And then we send all our signals along our sensory neuron. So that's going to be number 2, sensory neuron activated. So that's 2. So it's going to be 4, then 2. So it's got to be C. We know that already from just the first 2. And then why is it 1 and 3 next? So our motor neurons, then we go through our relay synapse from our sensory neuron. And then our motor neuron is activated, which activates our muscle, which causes a contract. So you get that jerk, pulling the foot and the bottom of the leg up. So that goes to, that's number 3 last. So C is the correct answer. The graph shows the effect of an antibiotic treatment on bacterial populations in the blood. What conclusions can be drawn from the graph? Antibiotics are effective against viral and bacterial infections. We have no viruses being tested here, so we can't conclude that there's any viral effect of antibiotics. So we don't want to say that. Antibiotics cause reduction of division in bacteria. We can't really say that. It could just be killing off all the bacteria. So we can't conclude that. Antibiotics take 10 days to kill all the bacteria. So we look here, all the bacteria are killed by what, 7.5 days. So yeah, we can't conclude that either. And also we can't conclude that all antibiotics take that long. Some antibiotics might take longer or less time, and depending on what bacteria we're using. And before the start of our antibiotic treatment, the bacterial population was rising. Well, we know that the bacterial treatment started on day 1, and then it's going up during this period. So day 0, before the antibacterial treatment started, antibiotic treatment started, our bacterial population was increasing. So we can conclude D is correct. What are involved in reproduction in both animals and plants? So this, you've got to remember a bit of anatomy of animals and plants. So we look through, we've got ovary, embryos, testes, ovule, stigma, and uterus. So if we look through these, in both animals and plants, we have both an ovary and an embryo. We only have a testes in animals. We only have an ovule. We only have an ovule. We only have a stigma in plants, and we only have a uterus in animals. So it can't be any of these 3. It's got to be A. The diagram shows different parts of the female reproductive organs where different methods of birth control can be used. Where should a diaphragm be placed before intercourse if a couple do not want a baby? So this, if we look here, the eggs are produced here, they flow down the ovarian duct into here, and they're fertilized here, and they implant into the wall of the uterus here. And if they're fertilized here, we don't want the sperm going up here. So we place a cup here, and then we will stop the sperm from getting past here, and so they can't fertilize the embryo. So we want to put something at D. 26. The diagram shows an experiment on germination. Groups of test tube were set up as shown. The groups were placed in different conditions. Seeds on dry cotton wool, seeds on wet cotton wool, and seeds on wet cotton wool with deoxygenated water sealed by oil on top. Which table shows the correct results? In condition 1, we've got dry cotton wool, which means that the seeds don't have any water. Seeds are pretty much dehydrated. They've got oil or carbohydrate stores, but they need water to start germinating, so these won't germinate. So either in the dark or the light. So condition 1, we're expecting not to germinate in the dark or the light. So it's not going to be this one, and it can't be this one. So we already ruled out the first C and D. 2, wet cotton wool. In wet cotton wool, if their seeds are kept in the dark, they won't have any energy for photosynthesis, and so they won't be able to grow. so you can see the whole question at once because it's quite a big one. But they will be able to germinate. So you don't have any energy for leaving them grow, but they will be able to germinate initially using the energy stored in the seed. Because remember, if the seed was planted underground, it would germinate, and then as soon as the seed, the little root, the shoot tip popped out above ground, then it would start growing leaves and start photosynthesizing and using energy generated by itself. So it should be able to grow in the dark or in the light, but it won't be able to produce leaves unless it's in the light. So 2, we want both to grow in both conditions, but in B, so it can't be B. So we've already concluded that the answer must be A. And why would 3 not grow either in the dark or in the light? So if you've got no oxygen, then the seed initially can't respire in order to generate energy, generate ATP in order to start growing. So even if it's light, it can't start photosynthesizing until it's growing leaves, and leaves provide energy, so it won't grow either in the dark or the light. So that's correct. So it's going to be A. 27. In arthropods, growth occurs only after the exoskeleton is shed before the new one hardens. Which graph shows a typical growth curve for an arthropod? So if we think about if the exoskeleton is a set size, your exoskeleton is a set size and you have to shed it and then grow a new one, then you can only really grow during the time when you don't have an exoskeleton and your new one is hardening. So you're going to grow in steps. So it's going to be a bit jerky, so it can't be continuous. And if we're having a growing arthropod, it's not going to stay the same length the whole time. So it can't be this one. Again, this one, the length of the arthropod doesn't change. So this is saying that the arthropod shrinks during the time when it has the exoskeleton and then grows when it doesn't have an exoskeleton. The exoskeleton is a fixed size, it can't shrink or grow. So it can't be C, so it must be B. We have a constant size where we have our exoskeleton, then we shed our exoskeleton and grow very, very quickly. And then our new exoskeleton hardens and we set the constant size, and then that repeats lots and lots of times. So it's B. The graph shows the masses of 2 different types of tomato. What can be concluded from the graph? Genes do not affect the mass of tomatoes. Type 1 tomatoes show continuous variation. Type 2 tomatoes are sometimes smaller than type 1 tomatoes. Type 2 tomatoes show discontinuous variation. So because we have a histogram here and all of our bars are joined up, we can conclude there is continuous variation, not a discrete different sizes in our type of tomato. And these are just categories. These bins are just categories of ranges for which your tomatoes are weighed. So we do have continuous variation. So we're going to conclude that it's B, as it says in the mark scheme. So genes do not affect the mass of tomatoes. So we have 2 different types of tomato, each with different genotypes affecting their weights. So that's obviously not true. Type 2 tomatoes are sometimes smaller than type 1 tomatoes. In this experiment, type 2 tomatoes are always bigger than type 1 tomatoes. So it can't be that. Type 2 tomatoes show discontinuous variation. We can't include that from this because we have a histogram which implies continuous variation. So it can't be that. So it's got to be B. 29. Genetics is the study of development, mechanisms of inheritance, nuclear division, or variation between species. Genetics is the study of mechanisms of inheritance. It's how characteristics are inherited from mother or woman to child, mother and father to child, parents to child. What is unlikely to be affected by the environment? Blood group, body mass, health, or height. So this is blood group, because blood group is genetic. But body mass, if you don't eat as much or you eat lots, then you're going to get fat or very skinny, in which case you're going to be heavier or lighter, so that body mass can be affected by the environment. Health, if you eat really unhealthily or you don't do any exercise or you smoke lots, then your health is going to be affected, and that's environment, not genetic. And height, again, if you don't eat very much when you're a child, then you will not grow so much, and so you won't get so tall. So height can be affected by the environment. The diagram shows what happens to the energy that entered the atmosphere from the sun. How much of the energy is not used for photosynthesis? So if we think about 2% is absorbed by plants, 16% is reflected, 32% warms the ground, and 50% evaporates water. So how much of the energy is not used for photosynthesis? More than 98%, because only the 2% that's absorbed can be used by the plant, and not all of that is used by the plant. So more than 90%, 98%. The diagram shows a food chain: producers, herbivores, carnivores, top carnivores, and the trophic level underneath. If the carnivores in trophic level 3 suddenly die out as a result of disease, in which trophic levels are the number of organisms likely to decrease, so get lower? So if we have fewer carnivores, then they're going to be more herbivores, because there's going to be less things eating them, and then there's going to be less things for the top carnivores to eat, so there'll be fewer of them. And if there are more herbivores, then there are also likely to be fewer producers, because there will be more herbivores eating than producers. So we're going to have fewer producers and fewer carnivores. For top carnivores, our carnivores are completely died out, and our herbivores are going to boom for a bit because there's less things eating them. So less of 1 and 4. So B. Surface waters of the ocean contain a population of microscopic plants. What factor would result in fewer of these plants? An increase in population of microscopic animals, greater concentration of mineral nutrients, higher temperature, or more light. So the microscopic animals eat them. Mineral nutrients, if there are more nutrients, then they could, in theory, create more plants, so they grow more. Higher temperature would mean that you can have less limits of photosynthesis, so they could grow more. And more light would mean they're going to be able to do more photosynthesis, so you have to grow more. So fewer plants, it'll have to be A. By which process does water enter the atmosphere? Condensation, photosynthesis, precipitation, transpiration. So condensation is the process of gaseous water, water vapor, becoming liquid water. Photosynthesis is the process of generating complex carbon molecules from carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Precipitation is the process of gaseous water forming liquid water and falling from the sky, so raining or snowing. And transpiration is the process by which water is drawn up from the ground or from the from the ground through roots to the plant, and then exits into the atmosphere as gaseous water through the stromata in the plant leaves. So it's going to be D. The diagram shows part of the carbon cycle. Which labeled arrow represents photosynthesis? The carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So remember, photosynthesis is the process by which carbon dioxide is turned into complex carbon molecules in plants. So carbon dioxide going to plants is going to be photosynthesis. It's going to be A. Green plants going into carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So that's either burning the plants or them being eaten, and then the animal dying. And then D is being animals eating the plants and animals dying. It puts carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, or animals breathing and respiring. What are products of respiration in green plants? Respiration, remember, is common in both animals and plants, and it's the process of turning combining glucose with oxygen and turning it into carbon dioxide and water and producing energy in the process. So water and carbon dioxide are the products of respiration in both plants and animals. In 2005, 15 mice were set free on an island where mice had never lived before. The table shows how their population changed over the next 3 years. So it goes from 15 to 62 to 337 to 965 in just 3 years. What caused the population change in the table? Lack of food, lack of predators, lack of space, or lack of water. So if there was no food, then they'd die off. If there was no space, then they would be constrained to a very small population. If there's a lack of water, they'd be constrained to a small population, or they'd die off. And lack of predators means there's nothing to eat them, and so they just boom. There's nothing to kill them. So B is the correct answer. What is reduced when untreated sewage is released into rivers? The amount of nitrate, the concentration of the concentration of carbon dioxide, the concentration of oxygen, or the number of bacteria. This is C, the concentration of oxygen. So untreated sewage releases bacteria and other microorganisms into the rivers, which then consume all the oxygen to respire. The diagram shows a food chain. A farmer sprays his cabbages with pesticide. Which organisms does the farmer want to kill? The cabbages are eaten by green flies, which are eaten by beetles, which are eaten by small birds. And if the green flies are eating the cabbages, he wants to kill the green flies, doesn't he? To stop the cabbages from being eaten. So he wants to kill the green flies, but he wants to encourage the beetles, which are always going to kill the green flies, and possibly want to kill the birds, but that might not be allowed. So B is the right answer. Which pollutants of water can lead to eutrophication? So this is like an algal bloom, so things going like in waterways, the algae or the small microplants getting really out of hand and getting huge, and then causing lakes and rivers to be covered in these plants, and basically everything underneath them to die off because it has no light. And it is really, really bad for rivers and lakes. So what pollutants can cause this? So anything which is going to encourage these algae to grow. So fertilizers can cause it. Herbicides are going to kill the algae, so that's not going to help. Insecticides are not really going to affect them, and sewage can increase the nutrients for the algae, so that can help them. So the correct answer is B. Okay, so that's the end of the paper. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it useful. And if you have any questions, then post them up on the chat on Slack.